Hello everyone, I have another video for you today. I have 2 more Reddit stories. I hope you enjoy. Here is the title of the first story. My marriage fell apart because of a backstabbing mother-in-law. I never thought my life would turn into one of those melodramatic posts you read online, but here I am. Let me set the stage. My wife, Olivia, and I had been married for 5 years. She was the love of my life, my best friend, the person who could calm me down with just a look. But she came with a small caveat: her mother, Claire. Claire was the kind of mother-in-law who thrived on control. She always had a way of making her presence known, whether it was through subtle jabs or overtly inserting herself into our decisions. I tried to tolerate her for Olivia's sake, but every interaction felt like walking through a minefield. I'd always hoped time would smooth things out, but in hindsight, I was naive. Our problem started when Olivia and I decided to buy our first home. We'd been saving for years, scrimping and sacrificing to make it happen. Claire, of course, had opinions about everything, from the neighborhood to the layout of the house to the color of the kitchen cabinets. She acted like it was her purchase. I bit my tongue because I didn't want to cause drama. Olivia assured me her mom was just trying to help. The first real red flag came after we'd moved in. Claire had a spare key. I wasn't thrilled about it, but Olivia said it was just in case of emergencies. I should have trusted my gut because Claire started using it for far more than emergencies. I'd come home from work to find her in our living room, rearranging furniture or reorganizing cabinets. She'd laugh it off and say she was just making the place more functional, but it felt like a violation. When I brought it up to Olivia, she said her mom meant well and asked me to be patient. Patience wore thin when Claire started making comments about our finances. She'd always been skeptical of my career, calling it unstable and implying that Olivia could have done better. I worked in freelance graphic design, and while it wasn't the most conventional path, I was successful. Claire, however, loved to remind me that she was a firm believer in steady 9-to-5 jobs with benefits. She started planting seeds of doubt in Olivia's mind, questioning whether we could afford the house or if I'd be able to provide in the long term. It caused tension between us, and I could feel the cracks starting to form. Then came the baby. Olivia and I had always wanted kids, and when we found out she was pregnant, I was overjoyed. Claire's reaction was complicated. She was excited, sure, but it felt like she saw this as her grand opportunity to step in and take over. She started bombarding us with advice, most of which contradicted what we'd planned. When Olivia and I decided to keep the gender a surprise, Claire accused me of trying to control the narrative and leave her out of important moments. It was exhausting. The real betrayal, though, came after our son, Liam, was born. Claire ramped up her interference, showing up unannounced nearly every day. She'd critique how we fed him, how we dressed him, even how we decorated his nursery. One day, I came home to find her repainting the walls because she thought the color we'd chosen was too bright for a baby. Olivia begged me to let it go, saying her mom was just trying to help us adjust to parenthood. I was furious but agreed for the sake of keeping the peace. Things hit a breaking point when I overheard a conversation between Claire and Olivia. I'd come home early from a client meeting and walked in on them talking in hushed tones. Claire was telling Olivia that I was irresponsible, that I wasn't providing enough, that I wasn't the kind of husband or father she deserved. She said Olivia needed to think about what was best for Liam, implying that I was a liability. I stood there, frozen, as Olivia didn't defend me. She didn't agree, but she didn't stand up for me either. That night, I confronted Olivia. She was defensive, saying her mom was just worried about us. I asked her if she believed any of it, and she hesitated. That hesitation was like a punch to the gut. I realized Claire had been chipping away at her confidence in me for years, and it was starting to work. I told Olivia that her mom needed to back off, that this constant interference was ruining our marriage. She promised to talk to her, but nothing changed. The final straw came when I discovered that Claire had been meddling in our finances. Olivia and I had a joint account for household expenses, and I noticed some unusual transactions. When I asked Olivia about them, she said her mom had suggested moving some money around to create a safety net. Claire had convinced her to open a separate account without telling me. I felt completely betrayed. This wasn't just meddling anymore, this was sabotage. I told Olivia I couldn't live like this. I loved her, but I couldn't keep fighting a battle I was doomed to lose. Claire had too much influence over her, and Olivia wasn't willing to set boundaries. We started going to therapy, but it was clear the damage had been done. Every session felt like rehashing the same arguments, and Claire's presence loomed over everything. One day, Olivia came home and told me she talked to her mom and set some ground rules. I wanted to believe her, but I'd heard this before. Sure enough, Claire found ways to circumvent the rules. She'd call Olivia during our therapy sessions, leave passive-aggressive voicemails, and even showed up at my workplace once to chat. It was suffocating. Eventually, Olivia and I separated. It was the hardest decision I've ever made, but I knew I couldn't keep living in Claire's shadow. The divorce was amicable enough, but Claire's fingerprints were all over it. She made snide comments during mediation, acting like she'd won some twisted game. Olivia and I agreed to joint custody of Liam, but Claire's influence didn't stop there. She'd undermine me at every turn, questioning my parenting and filling Liam's head with stories about how Grandma was the only one who really understood him. It's been 2 years since the divorce. I'm in a better place now, but the scars are still there. I've learned to set boundaries and prioritize my own mental health, but I still struggle with the idea that I lost my marriage not because of anything Olivia or I did, but because of Claire's relentless meddling. She'd always wanted control, and in the end she got it. After the divorce, there were times when I questioned everything. Was I too harsh? Could I have done something differently? Therapy helped me unpack those feelings, but I'd be lying if I said the what-ifs didn't haunt me. Liam's well-being became my top priority. I poured everything into being the best father I could be, even when Claire's shadow loomed over our co-parenting arrangements. Co-parenting with Olivia was a delicate dance. She seemed to want to move on from the past, but Claire's influence was a constant barrier. There was an incident where Claire showed up at one of Liam's school events and made a scene because I hadn't informed her about it. It was a minor misunderstanding blown out of proportion, but it was emblematic of the larger issue. Claire still saw herself as the central figure in our fractured family dynamic. The most frustrating part was the impact on Liam. He's a smart, observant kid, and I could see the confusion in his eyes. He'd asked me why Grandma said certain things about me or why Mommy and I didn't live together anymore. How do you explain adult betrayal and manipulation to a 6-year-old? I focused on showing him love and stability, hoping that actions would speak louder than words. Over time, I started to rebuild my life. I moved into a new home, found a community of supportive friends, and even started dating again. It wasn't easy, and trust was a massive hurdle. The thought of letting someone else into my life, knowing the potential for chaos, was terrifying. But slowly, I began to heal. One of the turning points came when I met a woman named Rachel. She was kind, empathetic, and understood my baggage without judgment. She'd gone through her own share of hardships, which gave her a perspective that resonated with me. We took things slow, and for the first time in years, I felt a sense of hope. Rachel met Liam, and their bond was instantaneous. Seeing her treat him with love and respect, without any ulterior motives, was like a breath of fresh air. Of course, Claire wasn't thrilled about Rachel's presence in our lives. She made snide comments during drop-offs and tried to plant seeds of doubt in Olivia's mind about Rachel's intentions. But by this point, I'd learned how to handle Claire. Her tactics didn't hold the same power over me anymore. I'd built a foundation of confidence and resilience, and her attempts to undermine me only reinforced my determination to protect the life I was rebuilding. There was one moment, though, that stood out as a definitive turning point. It was Liam's 7th birthday, and we'd planned a small party with close friends and family. Claire, predictably, tried to take over the planning, insisting on inviting people we didn't know and making decisions without consulting anyone. For the first time, Olivia stood up to her. She told Claire that this was Liam's day, not hers, and that she needed to step back. It was a small victory, but it felt monumental. In the years since, I've found a sense of peace. My relationship with Olivia has improved. We've learned to co-parent effectively, setting boundaries that prioritize Liam's well-being. Claire is still Claire, but her influence has waned. She no longer has the power to dictate the terms of my life. Looking back, I've come to understand that the real enemy wasn't Claire herself, but the lack of boundaries that allowed her behavior to fester. Love is a partnership, and partnerships thrive on mutual respect and unity. If there's one lesson I've learned, it's that you can't let anyone, no matter who they are, come between you and the foundation you've built with your partner. Life isn't perfect, but it's mine. And for that, I am grateful. That is the end of the first story. Losing the love of my life over something trivial, or someone making a fabrication of lies about me, would ruin me. Hopefully this man has a brighter existence going forward. Hopefully Claire can calm down and not be so overwhelming. Let's get to the next story. Here is the title. I found out my mother-in-law was spreading lies about me and I almost lost my wife. I never thought my life would come to this. What started as a simple misunderstanding escalated into something much worse. Looking back, I can see the exact moment when everything began to unravel. The person I trusted the most, my wife, was caught in the middle of it all, and I was left fighting for the truth. It was a battle I didn't know I had signed up for, and it all started with a lie. Let me set the stage. I've been married to my wife, Julia, for 5 years. We have a good relationship, or at least I thought we did. We'd been through a lot together, some ups and downs, but nothing we couldn't handle. Our families were close, at least on the surface. Julia and I had moved into a cozy little house about 30 minutes away from her parents, but we made an effort to visit them regularly. Her mom, Diane, was a big part of her life. She always had something to say about everything, especially when it came to Julia's decisions. I've always tried to be respectful, even though I knew Diane could be a bit much sometimes. She was one of those people who had an opinion on everything, and you better believe she'd let you know what she thought. And don't even get me started on her tendency to help out with things I didn't need help with, like when she tried to tell me how to grill a steak at a family barbecue or how to handle a car repair. But despite her quirks, I got along with her. We didn't exactly see eye to eye on everything, but we kept the peace for the sake of family. Or at least, that's what I thought was going on. It was about a month ago when I first noticed something off. Julia and I had been having some minor arguments here and there, mostly about small things, but nothing that seemed like it would cause any major issues. Then one night, Julia came home late from a dinner at her parents' house. She seemed a little off, like something was bothering her, but she wouldn't tell me what it was. I tried to push her, but she just brushed it off, saying she was tired and that it was nothing. I didn't press any further, thinking maybe it was just a long day. A few days passed, and I still noticed something strange going on between Julia and her mom. Julia's demeanor had changed. She was more distant, more irritable. We started fighting more often, and not just about little things. These fights were getting worse. At first, I thought it was just stress, but the more I tried to talk to her, the more she would shut me out. That's when I started wondering if there was something else going on, something that involved her mother. I decided to pay a visit to Diane's house to get to the bottom of it. I wanted to speak with her and maybe get some insight into what was going on with Julia. The conversation didn't go as planned. Diane was her usual self, overbearing, but I could tell she was holding something back. She didn't seem like her usual self either, but I chalked it up to her trying to manage her own issues. She made some small talk, and I was about to leave when she casually mentioned something that stopped me in my tracks. She said, "You know, Julia has always been so emotional. I don't think she'll ever really be able to handle the kind of life you're trying to build together." I was shocked. This wasn't the kind of thing a mother-in-law says about her daughter, especially not in front of her son-in-law. Something was definitely off, and it felt like Diane was trying to plant seeds of doubt in my mind. But I didn't react. I just nodded, pretending I didn't hear the comment. Later that night, I confronted Julia about what Diane had said. Her reaction was immediate, and not at all what I expected. She became defensive and almost angry that I'd bring up a conversation with her mom. It felt like she was protecting Diane, and that's when the truth started to hit me. There was a lot more going on behind closed doors than I had ever realized. I decided to take matters into my own hands. Over the next week, I began to dig into the situation, trying to figure out what was really going on. I went through Julia's phone, looking for any signs of communication between her and her mom that might give me a clue. I found nothing, but the more I thought about it, the more I felt like there was something she was hiding from me. Then, I received an anonymous tip. Someone had messaged me on social media claiming that Diane had been talking badly about me behind my back to a few of our mutual friends. At first, I thought it was a prank, but the more I read, the more it seemed real. Apparently, Diane had been telling people that I wasn't a good husband, that I was too controlling, and that I didn't treat Julia well. I was floored. It felt like a gut punch. I couldn't believe what I was reading. All these things that Diane had supposedly been saying about me were complete lies. She had twisted everything about my relationship with Julia, making me out to be some kind of villain. I was livid. But even more than that, I was hurt. Diane, who I had always respected, was the one poisoning the well, making my marriage look like something it wasn't. I immediately confronted Julia again. This time, I showed her the messages. She didn't deny it. Instead, she broke down in tears. It turned out that Diane had been planting doubts in her head for months. Diane had been telling her that I wasn't good enough for her, that I was too emotionally distant, and that I didn't understand her needs. Julia had been listening to her mom's manipulation and letting it affect our relationship. As the pieces started to come together, I learned the full extent of what had been happening. Diane had been lying about me to Julia, feeding her all kinds of negative information. Julia had been holding on to these false beliefs without ever discussing them with me. In fact, she had started to believe that I wasn't the husband she thought I was. This was when things got really bad. Julia was torn between the two of us. She didn't want to believe the lies her mother had told her, but she also didn't want to confront her mom. I felt betrayed. The woman I had married had let someone else's words poison our relationship without even giving me a chance to explain. It took days of arguing, talking, and crying for Julia to finally see the truth. She apologized profusely, telling me how sorry she was for letting her mom get into her head. It wasn't just about the lies. It was about her inability to stand up to her mother when it mattered the most. But even after all of that, things didn't go back to normal right away. I found it hard to trust Julia fully again. I was so angry at Diane, but even more so at myself for not seeing what was happening sooner. I had allowed myself to be manipulated by someone I thought I could trust. It wasn't an easy road, but after months of work, Julia and I slowly began to rebuild. We had therapy sessions together, where we worked on our communication and trust. We made a pact to never let anyone, especially family members, come between us again. Julia eventually went to her mom and had an honest conversation about the lies that had been spread. Diane denied everything, of course, but Julia stood her ground. Now, months later, things are better, but I'll never forget the pain I felt when I found out how deeply Diane's lies had cut into my marriage. I've learned a lot about the power of family dynamics, and how even the most well-intentioned relationships can go awry. But the one thing I'm certain of now is this: no one should ever let a third party control their marriage. Trust and communication are everything, and that's the lesson I'll carry with me for the rest of my life. And as for Diane? I'll never trust her again. She may be Julia's mother, but she crossed a line that can never be undone. I'll always be cautious around her, and I'll make sure she knows that I'm not the villain she tried to make me out to be. My loyalty will always lie with Julia, but I'll never forget how close I came to losing everything because of a lie. If there's one thing I hope anyone reading this takes away, it's that no matter how close you are with family, never let them come between you and your partner. Your relationship should be a partnership, not a battle against outside forces trying to tear it down. Trust, honesty, and loyalty are everything, and no lie is worth losing that over. That is the end of the story. I normally have something to say, but that last comment was everything I wanted to say. Don't let family break up your love and passion for your partner. I hope you enjoyed the stories. There is a link in the description for my Reddit Stories playlist. Go watch them if you like. Have a great day.